Kia ora koutou. Start the meeting with karakia from
Morena.
Councillor Templeton. Kia ora koutou. Start the
Morena.
meeting with karakia from Councillor Templeton.
Kia tau te Māori o Ronga, kia tau te Māori o Daro. Paihere tia te ture wairua, paihere tia te ture tangata. He pō arahi i a tātou i tēnei wā. Kia tika te whakaro, kia tika te kupu, tihei Māori ora.
Apologies for that.
We've just lost audio, by the way.
We're just noting also, just moved the apologies, James. Also noting that you and Catherine will be, when she joins, will be on Zoom. Haven't been made aware of any declarations of interests. Confirmation of previous minutes from the 4th of November. Does someone like to move that? Tim, carried it. Seconded Andrew. All those in favour? Against? Carried. There are no public forums. Deputations, we have 3 this morning. First up is Kim Fowler on behalf of the University of Canterbury Student Association, talking to item 10.
She's online.
Welcome, Kim. Thank you. You have 10 minutes, and that includes time for any questions and answers as well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Tēnā koutou, thanks for having me here today. It's really lovely to have a chance to speak to you all. I'm here today to support the Free Fares campaign, but I'm really here to give you a specific insight to what this would mean for UC students. So basically, the reason the UCSA got stuck into the campaign is that earlier in the year, we surveyed students to find out their perspectives on travel and public transport in Canterbury and Christchurch. Some of the context for this is that in the UC travel survey, which is a biannual survey the university does, I'll just get the numbers in front of me, but basically the main mode of transport that students use to get to university is car at 40%, and bus comes in very, very small at 9%. And so we really wanted to understand why this was for students. And what the sort of resounding response that came back was that students care about the environment and they want to use the bus. But if you own a car or you've got a car that you can use, it's cheaper and more convenient to drive in Christchurch, which I think a lot of us know. But for students, the price is a huge factor. So part of the reason we've got involved in the Free Fares campaign is that we've been advocating for a student discount in Canterbury to ECAN over the last few months. And it's really exciting that ECAN has agreed in principle for a discount for tertiary students next year, which is subject to their annual planning process. And the reason we've been advocating for this is that in recent research that came out of UC, surveying under 25s, so not quite students, but pretty close, it was found that implementing a discount would be the #1 driver to get more students on the bus. But what we heard from ECAN is that a bus discount is expensive, even though it will change behaviour, it will get cars off roads. So not only is that having a positive impact on the environment, but it's also likely to reduce congestion around the university for others who do need to drive. But we did hear that it was expensive, and so we've hopped on board with this campaign to ask the government to fund fares-free travel for under 25s tertiary students and community service card holders, because we think this will have a really positive impact on students. We think it will change their behaviour, which will be great for us all. And it's something that we've heard from students that they want. 86% of students do support fares-free travel for students. I think that's most of my spiel. But yeah, basically it's really important. I think it also the other factor of the argument. There's a strong environmental argument to fill our sort of reasonably empty buses in Canterbury with people who are price sensitive or would respond to fares free travel. But there's also an equity argument. Introducing free fares would mean that there's less barriers for people to access higher education because there wouldn't be a costing curve with getting to university. We heard stories from students who were, could only afford to bike when they did a survey earlier in the year. One student said that they felt forced to bike even when it was raining or they were injured, and some that came through are really heartbreaking. So that's why I'm really passionate about this. And I hope that you'll add your name in support because it's an awesome initiative.
Thank you. Kim, is there any questions? Jake?
Thanks, Kim. Hey, I'm wondering, you've been to ECAN and ECAN have said too expensive, essentially, and now the free fares movement is asking central government to fund this. Are you worried, or have you had any response yet from central government, and are you worried you'll get stuck in between two essentially funding bodies, both of whom are saying it's each other's responsibility?
Well, I think what's great about this is that it's a nationwide campaign. So it would be affected, the ask is for across the country, not just in Canterbury. So I think it would be very hard for central government to put it just back onto one council, at least that's my hope. Of course, that's always a concern, but really what's important is that we put many names behind it and get more people in support so there's less chance of finger pointing, I guess. But I understand the minister's well aware of it at this point. So we're just trying to continue that push and gain broader support.
Aaron?
Yeah, morning, Kim. Thank you for your submission. So it appears to make sense, and the numbers look like they stack up when you get such good responses from the students. But often what people say and what people do, as you'll know, will be quite different things. So how long would you see this should be done if it was done as a trial? How long do you think that would take to see that an uptake? Are you talking months, 6 months, a year? What would be good if that was a first step?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what's important, we've talked about this. So first of all, I know that there's some modelling out in the public domain that was commissioned by ECAN on fares free travel, and it was for everyone, but that should help to understand maybe what the behaviour change would actually look like rather than just survey responses. And I think I can find that it was in one of their public media agendas. The trial period, I think what's even more important is the timing for students of the trial rather than just the period. What's important is that we need a discount to start before February, so like in late January or early February, because that's the time at which we get the most amount of new students coming to UC. And so it's at that time where you've got students who've just moved down, they might not own a car, and you can start to build that public transport habit at that stage and contribute to long-term behaviour change, I think. So really that's probably most important, but maybe a whole year would be good. I think it will continue to have positive traction as more people respond to it, but it is hard to change that initial habit. So I think it'd be most important to target that key period where students are sort of new to the area and figuring out how they will get around.
Thank you.
Jimmy?
Thank you. Kim, one question, particularly regarding to your free bus fare campaign. You focus on a uni student or a tertiary student. Is focus on the undergraduate, those students, or including all those adult students, their age over 25 years age?
All students, because all students, most students, unless you're in very extraordinary circumstances, are likely to experience financial hardship. And I think for some of our adult students who have different demands around or different accessibility around what student hardship funding they can get, allowance loan, or maybe they've got other demands like raising children, it's still important. It's for all tertiary students, but the campaign does ask for community service card holders and under 25s too, but I'm here today to specifically talk about why it's important for tertiary students. That's
Okay.
what I represent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim, for your time.
Thank you.
The next deputation is from Lilybell Oakley, also regarding item 10. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Just like the previous speaker, you have 10 minutes, and that includes questions and answers.
Well, I'm here to speak as someone who'd greatly benefit from the free public transport. I am a student, I'm a community service card holder, and I also can't drive for medical reasons. So the public transport system is already very important to me, and it's not bad in Christchurch, but it's too expensive. Like on a good week, I might have $50 left over after essentials. A week of busing to uni would be half of that. And then on a bad week, I might have nothing left after essentials and then I can't bus. Now, I'm fortunate that I've got a decent bike which I can use to get around on, but that's not suitable all the time. You have bad weather, rain, wind. I've come off my bike in winter hitting an ice patch. I get 4 or 5 punctures a year from glass on the roads, which puts me out for a day and often involves a very long walk home. And then when I'm injured or sick, and a really good example of this is earlier this year in July, I actually got hit by a car and broke my nose, pretty battered, and my bike was broken. And I basically went home, tried to sleep it off, couldn't sleep because I was in pain, and the Panadol wasn't working. I had about three days of that. And then it took me another 3 or 4 days to find a friend who could give me a ride to the bike shop so I could drop off my bike to get it repaired. It was another week to get it repaired, and then another few days to find someone who could take me there to pick it up. Get it back, and I'm straight back onto riding, and it was terrifying. I was getting headaches. My head was going everywhere, just trying to see anything that could hit me. I was biking a lot slower, and I do Uber Eats by the bike. That's my part-time job. So I wasn't working that because I was too scared. It took me probably another month to adapt to that. And in all that time, in the time it took me to get back up and running, I felt pretty stranded at home. I used the bus twice to go and get groceries, but that was all I could afford, especially because I wasn't working Uber. And if I'd had access to the bus, if it'd been free, it would have been quite different to those. After I'd been hit, I probably would have gone to the hospital. I broke my nose. I took a pretty big head hit. I should have gone in and checked a concussion, but I couldn't afford that. And I wouldn't know, I could have called an ambulance, but how would I get home? And then being able to, at the very least, even if I didn't do that, I would have gone to the UC Health Centre the next day. I might be able to get something a bit stronger than Panadol to manage the pain and help with sleep. I could have taken my bike in myself to get it repaired and get it back. And I wouldn't have had to jump straight back onto using it full time. I could have worked myself into it and gone back to biking a lot earlier. It would have turned was basically a month-long ordeal into maybe a week. And I've got a bike. A lot of people who are poor don't. As I said, I'm on community service. I don't have a lot of money. And trying to get to uni without my bike, I missed 2 weeks when I got hit by the car. I did my best to study from home, but I couldn't make it to labs. I couldn't make it to group project meetings. We had to postpone those. And then when I could bike, we had to play catch up. And that bus would have been amazing for recovering from that. We've turned the whole ideal into, a few days off, maybe a couple of weeks not working, but it would have been a lot easier. Yeah, I think that's what I've got to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No. Pauline?
Thank you for that really heartfelt submission, deputation. Are you okay now?
Yes, I've healed, I've recovered, and I'm comfortable on my bike again.
Oh, that's good news. Excellent.
Thank you, Lilybell, for your deputation. It was very powerful. Thank you. The last deputation is from James Curry on behalf of Generation Zero. Welcome, James.
Adam.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, it's not what I've got written in front of me.
All good.
Welcome, Adam. You have 10 minutes, and that includes questions and answers.
Cool. Kia ora koutou, Adam toka ingoa, toka whānau tipunga ko Clay McLaren, ko Loch Lomond, iki kuti rana, kia ora. I'm not gonna. I think that the last two speakers, Kim and was it Lindley, spoke much deeper on this and clearly than I can. But I'm from Generation Zero, and I'm just going to briefly just talk about why it's really important that the Christchurch Council gets behind this, and the importance of it. I mean, to start off with, we know across the world that free transport schemes have been incredibly effective in equity and in climate. We know that there's been considerable increase in patronage, both in terms of number of passengers and number of ships per person. You look at Belgium and you look at Templin in Germany, for example, they both had in excess of 1,000 increases in patronage, 1,000%, so 10 times an increase in patronage just from free fares, right? You look at The Hague, you look at Västra in Sweden, you look at Chechnya, you look at the Netherlands, they had triple patronage rates. So in almost every jurisdiction, you've seen between 3 to 10 times roughly increase in patronage rates. So if we want to be getting people off cars, if we want to be getting people into buses, and if we want to be getting people into our city and making the city more vibrant and getting people in there, we know that free bus fares will do that, right? So start off with, we know that free bus fares are good for people and they're good for people's equity, and we also know that they're good for climate. Obviously, they get people off the roads. We know that they get people off car use. There's really clear studies again across the world in Estonia and Sweden, where car use decreased by 45%. You look actually in Dunedin as well. There's actually some the university numbers, and in Dunedin, where I used to live in university, they reduced bus fares for COVID, and they also reduced it to $1. And then far more students actually got the bus into town and didn't drive, because often, if you can, there's so many parks in Dunedin, right? You may as well just drive. But as soon as the bus fares became free, people really did get the bus. So it does make a big difference. There's no disadvantage for the council doing it. There's no commitment. You're asking for funding for the government. You're lobbying for funding for the government, as you see Dunedin City Council. We've seen other councils across the country who've all got behind this as well. And there is pressure on Minister Wood. Free Fares is meeting with Minister Wood relatively regularly, and he knows the pressure is there. But every council really is making a big difference and showing the government that free fares is really something that we need to do for our climate. If you look at the statements that Christchurch City Council has made so often and often again about climate and the importance of emissions reductions, really not getting behind this would really be a bad look. And not getting behind what is really a clear thing. It's good for equity. It's getting repetitive, but it's really obvious, right? It's good for equity. It's good for everybody. It's good for vibrant cities. It gets people into cities. It's good for safety as well. It's good for all these things, and it's a really clear thing with very little disadvantage for the CCC to get behind. So I'm not going to take up too much time. I've got other stuff I can talk about, but I think a lot of it's repeating what others have said. So it's also very popular as well. And I've got lots of stats here, but you've heard of that stuff. So kia ora, Koto, you're keen to answer any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Jake?
Thanks, Adam. Hey, do you have a view in terms of who would ideally fund this, central government, local government, or would you like to see us fund even a localised version of something like this, as Dunedin have obviously done to a degree?
I think so. I guess the first thing, number one, is obviously just getting behind the free fares nationally, and ideally it should be funded by national government. But I think that, and if you ask the national government to fund it, that's great. But if the national government doesn't fund it, that's not a get out of jail free card to say it's not our problem. And so, while ideally, it should be funded by national government, if and at least until national government funds it, trials and being funded by local government is what needs to happen in the meantime. And so you see Wellington, for example, is having, I haven't got the exact details in front of me, but either free or cheap fares over Christmas. You see Dunedin's done the $1 bus fare. So generally reducing bus fares as much as possible, lobbying lobbying to change the fare box recovery ratio and lobbying to get national funding. And that is totally our preference. But then until that happens, local government does need to step up and make bus fares as cheap as you possibly can or free in the meantime.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
Aaron?
Yeah, Adam, thank you for your presentation, and also we had one from Kim from the university speak before, and I asked the same question around a trial period because you said you named some cities which are a little different to ours, but they had great uptake, 300 to 1,000%. It'd become a no-brainer if that was the case here. But the behaviour here seems to be different, so I think a trial would be more prudent. How long do you think a trial would need to be to make it successful? And I'm not sure if you saw Kim's. She suggested starting in time for a calendar year at university would make the most sense, and I'd have to agree. But what are your thoughts on a trial and how long?
I think our position is the first things that a trial need to start as soon as possible. Was the first really important thing, and I think we've learned a lot from the Auckland trial for half price bus fares for community service card holders. And I think one of the biggest reasons the Free Fares campaign was launched was the plan is, in the draft emissions reduction plan, is for the Auckland trial is going for now, and then it won't be extended to the rest of the country. But in 3 years' time, when it's finished, they will then consider extending it to the rest of the country. We know that's not good enough. So I think that a trial will be really helpful, starting as soon as possible. Aligning with university dates could be really effective, and we'd support that. And I think it would really need to see the impact. A year or 2 years would be really what's needed. And I think we will see, and then we can the council can decide whether to continue or not. But a year or 2.5 review after that could be really good. But I think that the thing is getting it as soon as possible and ideally free if possible.
Sarah.
Thanks so much, Adam. I'm just wondering, there's talk of a trial and things, but I know we actually have a large group of the population who have free fares already, and that's those with super gold cards. The time is limited, but do you know the impact that made on the travels? My understanding is that it's been really successful and that people limit it to when it's actually free and don't travel at other times.
Limited to when it's actually free and don't travel. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what you mean by limit, that last sentence. Sorry.
Oh, it's just that, people with access to that, so the over 65s, tend to only travel when they've got the free access to the bus, because actually it's not free during peak hours and stuff.
There's that they do. Yeah, so there's been a lot of evidence that it is that they as you said, they have been travelling. I don't have numbers in front of me, but there's a really interesting report about that. And as you say, people, especially probably, and it may be different with over 65s because they may have more flexibility and the ability to travel off peak as well. But there has been a lot of evidence showing that people have been travelling off peak. Obviously, ultimately, though, we need free fares for on peak as well. So we need to be getting there. But in the Super Gold cards, it prevented 1.4 million car journeys in its first year when the Super Gold card was established. And 60% of Super Gold holders said they often or sometimes prefer taking public transport over car travel, and that changed dramatically. And so I think, and I've got the data here. 51% of respondents said it was now never true that they prefer to take the car. So it's not only actually getting people onto buses, it's actually making people appreciate buses and appreciate public transport and all the other social benefits that comes with that as well. So I don't know exactly about getting off peak, but the other thing I would note is that we do need on peak public transport to be free as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your time.
You're right.
Okay, so we're going to move straight to that item 10. So this obviously, I'll be moving it, but you can second if you like, Yanni. So this obviously comes on the back of the public forum we had at the last council meeting. I don't think I need to say much more. I'm just trying to work out, I've had a couple of conflicting information around Wellington City. They did. So Wellington
found the resolution.
Okay, so Wellington City did
24th
sign
of
up,
November.
so they're just not on their page at the moment. They have signed it. It's just not on their the Free Fares page. So obviously this is, I think we've heard quite a lot through the submissions, and there was one very powerful submission in there as well. I don't think I need to actually introduce any more. I might just go straight to questions, Tim. Question or yep.
So, question. This is clearly lobbying central government to fund this. I'm just clarifying that. So that's
yes.
Okay, because there wasn't mention about and would that include, or could we discuss with regards to looking at as Councillor Kerr mentioned, a trial period, which seems logical that it would be a calendar year with the start of students, etc. I mean, I'm just asking, is that a possibility? So first question is, it is definitely about lobbying central government for funding rather than the local government?
Yes.
And could we ask them to look at mentioning a trial period? Because it's not mentioned in here. So, okay.
Yeah.
Supported.
So what is our link, and who is our link, or what is the link between the collective and ourselves?
So Nathaniel had put me onto one contact who was the director of policy at the Anglican Church. That's a liaison point with the collective. That's the person that I have been speaking to, but I'm hoping that Nathaniel or Mike could provide further information about their links on.
Well, yeah, I think we need to remember this is not council itself advocating to it. It's a group, and obviously the group have a lot of support behind them. I'm sure it doesn't hurt to say, have you considered a trial? I don't think it's up to us to tell them to put forward a trial as an option. So look, if you want to do that as an amendment.
No. When we sign up to something, usually we have a conduit into it. There is a connection of some sort for some reason, whatever reason, and so what, is it? I mean, is it yourself? I don't know.
I have been having contact with people within the collective, so I'm assuming
because I wouldn't want to make them. Yeah. So I prefer the conduit from us going into that group to suggest maybe that's an option, because they are the ones making the contact with or lobbying central government or whatever. So I'm just saying, is that an option? So,
Aaron.
Mike, I'd be happy to move an amendment or an addition. It would be more that the government urgently consider a trial for a 1 year period and starting in time for the next tertiary year. So it starts at the end of January, like was asked for by the people. We can only ask for it, and they can say yay or nay, but to see if it can happen. They'd only have to commit for 1 year, and it's going to get people on buses or it's not. But at least we would go and ask for the territories that want to pick it up. Some probably might not be able to. What's that, sorry?
Aaron, so I'm just trying to work out who you are wanting to go to the government. Are you wanting this group so you want to ask this group to go to the government with their campaign to actually ask for a trial?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you just get some wording for your amendment?
Okay.
And email it to Nathaniel. Yeah.
How can we alter someone else's?
No, no, we're not
We
going to.
can't.
We've got to see Aaron's wording, but I don't think he's telling them to alter it. He's suggesting something. Yeah.
Because there's no timeline on here, Pauline, so the government could consider this for years. There's a mood for change, especially in their communities now. So why would we not jump on that and try and make it happen? Jump on a bus.
Anyhow, is there any other? Mel?
So if we were to do what Aaron says and the government isn't able to do that in time for next year, would that mean nothing would happen?
Yeah. It's a question we can't actually answer.
Yeah,
it's something that Aaron's obviously wants to put forward as an amendment, and he has the ability to do that.
And this, could we clarify who the conduit into this group for the council is? Because I think that's important too. So there's some direction. Is that, if it's yourself, Mike?
Yeah, I'm happy to take up that role.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we can note that down. Are there any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't include people over 25 who've maybe gone back to Hegley to do night class or something like that?
Tertiary students. Sorry.
They're not tertiary, they're going to Hegley College, they're secondary students or, well, I don't know what the class is, but it's not, it doesn't appear.
They'd most likely potentially be community service card holders, though.
Yeah, but it,
Yeah.
they
I
may
think
not.
they would struggle to. I think that most likely they would fall into that one of those categories. Yeah.
I'm just flagging there might be
Yeah,
other
yeah.
groups.
Yeah. The community service card holder normally captures a wide range of people that don't have a lot of money.
We should have taught you.
7. 8 I'll do, I'm not too sure. 7 I'll put it as an amendment. Because but 8 I'll fold into the substantive. Yeah, are you happy with that, Yanni? That the 8 just becomes part of the resolution, and we'll put Aaron's amendment as an amendment. Okay. It's number 7. No, I'm going to put it as an amendment. Or what's the general view of people?
I think we're all.
Would you consider that? I mean, I think it's no harm in.
We're just asking them.
They're wanting it just to happen because there's any evidence that it's the people really that don't want to try.
So the government might be open.
So the nature of it, if we recommend it to them, they're likely to say, well, thanks for your recommendation, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, I've got no problems with it.
Yeah. The whole thing.
The thing is, it's
Microphone.
Separately, instead of
Sarah,
recommending
microphone.
it is on. Sorry, thank you. Instead of us asking the Free Fares campaign, because they've already got a set thing that other councils have already signed up to and other organisations who would then need to reconsider it, we could just ask government to trial it. You know, we could say, yes, we'll sign up to the Free Fares thing, and separately, let's just send a thing to the government saying, let's trial Free Fares starting next year, rather than going through the other thing. Because that's a slight, you know, if we're doing a trial, it just means that all the other councils have to go and reconsider what they've already signed up to. Yeah. Should we do it directly to government?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I just didn't want to do that straight off the bat and steal the glory from the Free Fares campaign, because it's their campain that...
I just think that it's awkward asking other councils to go back and relook at something that's not what they've already signed up for.
Awkward asking the government for money.
Yeah,
Someone else knows.
Yeah.
We could, you know,
I
request that the
I
government
personally
do a
don't think-
trial while they're considering.
I
the
don't think
permanent-
we should
No.
ask them to trial it. I think we should be trying to ask them to commence it as soon as possible. I don't think there needs to be a one-year trial.
Yeah, but I think the government's trying to be a little bit fiscally prudent at the moment, so a trial's a lot easier to commit to because it's just 1 year of funding, and then they can head forward into it and look at the numbers, because the numbers will either stack up or they won't. In some areas, they might be really good, so they might go, going forward, we'll concentrate more here, others.
Anyhow, I'm going to put it as an amendment. And you're, yep.
I'd be happy on Sarah's suggestion that we do that as the amendment, Mike, but also as a council, we write separately to the government for them to bring it in next year as a council. Leave as is. Okay.
All right, let's debate this. Aaron, do you want to start with your? We will debate everything, but just noting that we will be putting in as an amendment first.
Just to my colleagues, the reason I put the amendment was based on the strength of today's deputations, and I thought LaBelle's one was very strong, and of course so was the universities. And the point that they're making is that they believe that the time for change is now, that people will get in behind this, and the numbers that they're claiming will get on buses, I'd be happy to be proven wrong, because I think what they believe will happen is a lot better than what I believe will happen, but I would love to be proved wrong at the end of next year, look back at this program and go, wow, that's made a huge difference to public transport. So we should stop making things into a plan and it's going to happen in the future, it'll eventually happen, we'll lobby for this, lobby for that. Just get on and do it. Let's be the council that starts to make things happen and happen now when people ask for it. In the big scheme of things, this wouldn't be that expensive for the government to trial and get behind, and I think they'd be right for the picking.
Pauline?
Yeah, look, I'm really pleased, Aaron, that you're supporting this. It's great and a great initiative. And I think a trial is a good idea. It makes it more palatable for someone to get behind it. I really commend this group for getting themselves organised and putting this up. As more power in numbers, so for us to get in behind this, I think is a really, really good signal that we're serious about our climate change targets. But also the fact that those submissions really struck a chord with me. The fact that we can easily forget what a couple of dollars means to people out there, and having access to the bus to make big changes in their lives is significant. And so we really need to support these people to be able to access the bus for free would be fantastic. I mean, there's no such thing as free, but we can collectively fund this nationally. So, yeah, I'll support the amendment. I think it's a good one, and I'll support the substantive, and congratulations to this group again.
Thank you. Sarah?
Kia ora. 1.8 million New Zealanders don't have a full driver's licence, and for those aged 16 and above who are able to get one, 800,000 New Zealanders are without. That's 21% of the eligible population. There's many reasons for this, but enabling access for those who don't drive and cannot afford bus travel is a clear equity issue. AA figures show that the cost of owning a small car is around $4,000 a year, a huge cost on struggling families. We know that free fares change behaviour. Those aged over 65 have had free, time-limited off-peak, free public transport since 2008. And for the most part, they choose to travel when it's free and not when there's a charge, avoiding peak hours. In the first year of the scheme, 1.4 million car journeys were replaced with bus ones. Imagine that across a broader section of society. I get why Aaron wants a trial, but I think that he's wrong. We need to move straight to this being put in permanently and not being a trial. There is ample evidence already to show that free fares work, and targeting those who are most disadvantaged in society, those most in need, will make a huge impact on the number of bus journeys taken, the number of car journeys that are not taken, and it will really support those who are struggling, who need it the most, especially with rising house prices. Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you. I think we're talking about this the wrong way. We're talking about the end users. What we're asking here is for the government to back its own signing of climate change, flying to Glasgow to talk to and with those leaders, etc. And the best way to do that is ask central government to take a small step, to take a year trial, which by all the figures that have been quoted today and by others will totally support this first move into a longer journey, which is absolutely essential for climate change. So that is what we are really truly asking to do, and I think we should be supporting. I think government, once they've done this year trial, if they choose to take it up, will have no choice but to continue it, because that's where the real figures will be. To ask them to take a broad brush stroke right across the country to supply free public transport to tertiary students, I think at the moment fiscally is just a step too far. What we need is a small step to prove that the bigger step is essential, and I totally support this. I think it's a clever move and a good move, so I'll support it. Thank you.
Anne.
Kia ora. I think it's great that we've got a united voice on this so far. It feels really good. So it's what this group is asking us to do is to support their advocacy for this, which I'm delighted to do. I think, I'm not sure if we need Aaron's amendments, but happy to support because it's great to have that collective voice coming through. That's the power of unified message, and we really want to add our weight to what they're trying to do here, which is going to have a great benefit to many.
Jimmy.
I support this one, but because this collective group is advocating a group, particular on those, is kind of the weakest group in the community. Those students are under 25 years of age or community service card holders. So that's very, very reasonable. And also the particular, they are advocating those issues totally compliant and consistent with the council's strategy, bylaw, policy, or objective, etc. Particularly, we heard there are three kind of the overall the deputations. One equity, the other one is consistent with the council climate change, reduce carbon emission, and also to ease our traffic congestion, etc. All reasonable, but permanently, I fully support just continually for those free bus, the kind of fare, rather than just 1 year. But this the kind of trial is a procedure. Maybe the every city, because they are the group, advocating group is the nationwide. Maybe the city or district is a different situation. But my goal still should be is permanent, rather than just 1 year. But try is a procedure. Your majority, all fellow councillors agree. I write to go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Jay.
Really happy to support this today, given the amount of carbon emissions that transport is responsible for. It's beholden upon us as a city council to do any and everything to reduce that number. But I'm also cognizant that that we are just asking someone else to do something, and that we do need to not, I guess, pat ourselves on the back too much, although we should be proud of ourselves and we should support this. But that doesn't mean, and it's not an excuse for our own inaction, and there's more things we could be doing, and the shuttle is an example of that. Rapid mass public transport is another, and
so is item 11 today.
Pauline.
That was actually you. What
Did she just shut you? Leanne.
I am going to support the amendment for exactly the reason that Anne set out. With the amendment, we get a unanimous position of council, and I think that is a very strong position for us to offer today. And I think that will be welcomed by the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity. The equity argument is very compelling, and it can only be enhanced by a trial, and so there is no harm in the amendment. One of the things that I was going to mention though was that this alone is not enough. That we do need to have frequency, we do need to have reliability, and we do need to have speed. And it has to be the most efficient and effective way to get from A to B in order to get that transformational change in public transport, which is why I will be supporting a notice of motion that's coming before council next week, which will line up with ECAN on some of the work that we need to be doing in order to support PT Futures. So I'm very supportive of this resolution today.
Andrew.
Thank you. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this resolution is about supporting a campaign.
It's not about developing policy of our own. It's not about developing a campaign of our own. It's supporting a campaign which is already in place. It's a campaign that, in my view, is advocating some very positive outcomes, and for that reason we should be supporting it. It's about equity, it's about climate change action, and of course we all know the role of transport in carbon emissions. It's potentially about city vibrancy, safety, equity, accessibility, and it's pretty clear that it'll make a huge difference to those people that would benefit from free fares. And we heard from some of those people this morning, and I thank them for coming along, sharing their stories and sharing their views with us. And I'd also acknowledge the people that have put this campaign together and that are promoting it so well. So there is a danger, and it's been pointed out, that the responsibility or the call to responsibility for funding free fares could fall between a crack between local and central government. But that's not a reason for not making the request. And whilst it wouldn't be an acceptable outcome, it's not a reason for not supporting this campaign. I believe that central government considering funding free fares would be the right thing to do. I support anything we can do to get more people onto buses, to get more people out of their single occupancy motor vehicles, to make public transport more attractive, more viable, more popular, and to get more people using it. And this is one thing that seeks to do that, and for that reason I support it. Now, it's good to hear wider support around the table supporting action in public transport than sometimes we do, and that brings me to the amendment. Early action's good action, and this amendment simply recommends a suggestion to the group for their consideration in the context of their wider campaign. So I don't necessarily see this as wanting a trial or not wanting a trial. It's just suggesting to the group that they consider the benefit of asking for a trial in the overall context of their campaign. That's up to them. We're just making a suggestion. I'm sure they'll consider that in the context of the campaign and what they're trying to achieve, and therefore I see no harm in it at all. And that's the reason that I'll be supporting the resolution and the amendment today.
Mel.
Look, I'd like to do a bit of research, and I had found some papers, but I'm not going to quote them, but they do basically say that free fares do open up bus travel and make it a default mode of transport, especially for young people across the world. And the deputation this morning was completely compelling. I'm willing to support any initiative that helps to reduce inequity, that increases the ability of those with less means to be connected to both people they know and the services that they require, and that will reduce reliance on cars and assist in our ambitions to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In time, I'd like to see those who might be able to access free fares extended as well to people such as adults undertaking secondary school studies who may not fit the other criteria of having a community services card or maybe older than 25. In addition to what Leanne said, which was really good, I think the other thing we need that's required to increase bus patronage with the frequency is that we need enough bus drivers to make sure all the routes have the current frequency of buses and not reduce them further. So that's something that's been in the news, obviously. And regarding Councillor Kearns' amendment, at first I wasn't inclined to support it because, quoting him, he said they should get on and do it, so therefore a trial probably isn't required. But I'm a team player and I'll vote for it if it's going to result in a unanimous vote for this notice of motion.
Yanni. Sam, do you want to speak to this? Or?
The only thing I was going to say is I probably agree with Andrew in a sense. It's a campaign that we're saying potentially get involved in, and I know we've got a campaign coming to council next week over 3 water reform, so I hope every councillor gives the same support that we're about to do today.
Thanks, Sam. Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really supportive of this. This has been something that I have previously tried to get council to look at, and I think the reality is that you've heard many of the reasons why this makes sense, but the fact is in Christchurch and in Canterbury, our car use has been growing at a much greater rate than people using public transport. So unless we're prepared to do something radically different, we're not going to change for the environmental outcomes that we desire. And so I think free fares is absolutely one of the fundamental components to looking at getting more people taking public transport. But I think I did want to support some of the comments that have been made by the Mayor that there are other things that we also need to be focused on. And the headline last week was nearly 1 in 3 Christchurch residents face a lengthy bus ride to get to their doctor, with lower income locals the most locked out. You recall when we did the PT Futures business case that some of us are arguing that cutting the bus routes in the poorest parts of our city, while we're spending zillions of dollars expanding bus priority to the growth areas, was inequitable. We have to take a much more holistic approach to public transport as a city, not just looking at the growth areas, but also people's ability to access it locally, particularly those people who need it the most. And unfortunately, previous governments and regional councils have seen public transport as a private, profit-making, competitive industry where they've contracted out to private companies to make profits off, rather than deliver services for the good of local communities. And it's really disappointing to see that the bus routes are now being cut back in terms of frequency because of a driver shortage. And you can't help but think, what was the impact of ECAN and NZTA taking away contracts from Red Bus and giving it effectively from a public company to a private Canadian pension fund that runs it through an Australian company. It's simply public transport run to make a profit, and that structure has to stop. And I do understand government are making some changes around the PTOM funding model. So I think this is a really important aspect of it in terms of the fare structure, but we also need to address the other barriers around providing routes in parts of the city that need it, and also the competitive funding environment that it currently operates in. But I'm really happy to advocate for this and to support the advocacy for it. I note that Wellington has been funded by Waka Kotahi to do a trial on the weekends and with the National Ticketing Service, something that we've also been asked to do, and we don't seem to have had any support from NZTA or Waka Kotahi. So yeah, let's support this, let's get behind it, let's try and do something different to encourage more people to take public transport who need it the most.
Thanks, Gianni. Celeste.
Yeah, I'm just sort of echoing pretty much what everyone else has said, but effectively supporting this campaign is about demonstrating our commitment to reducing emissions and addressing also the barriers to cost-effective travel for a range of people, and particularly students and low-income earners. And echoing Sarah's comment, there's also already a scheme that is targeted at gold card holders, and that we all know has been incredibly popular, and there's been really strong uptake, so there's no reason to think this would be any different. I don't support the amendment for the reason that the climate emergency is in a trial, and it's not going to be over in a year, and we need courageous action on the scale our climate needs. So I think that we should be setting the message that we should be using every technique and tool and that we have to push for strong action going forward into the future. And I can't see the reason why we would be pulling back on one of the levers. So I'm looking forward to seeing this go ahead.
Phil.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm certainly going to support all of this. We've got nothing to lose by doing this, but I feel we should be working with ECAN for the $2 bus ride trial for everybody, because then everyone gets part of the action. It would get more people on buses, it would change the way they think about it, and which would then result in less congestion. So I'll be supporting this, both the amendment and this. Thank you.
Sorry, you've already spoken, haven't you, Paul? No, sorry. Thank you. Just want to say I won't be supporting the amendment. However, if it does pass, I will support it when it becomes part of the substantive. The reason, firstly, why I don't want to support the amendment is actually I feel that it actually weakens what this group is trying to achieve. They clearly state in their submission that they want this implemented now. So this point in actually trying to do this commencing in time for 2022 academic year is irrelevant, because that's actually what they're trying to do. Bringing in a trial actually potentially is just a way to end it sooner than what this group wants. And it is correct what people are saying. We need a step change in what we do, and that requires actually a permanent direction in how we run and fund and charge for public transport. We know that there are a number of barriers for public transport users, and cost is one barrier. It's not the only barrier, but it is a very it's a big barrier for a number of people that are transport poor, and we really need to provide true alternatives for transport when it comes to getting people around. When we look at the climate emergency we currently face, and even with the growing population and the congestion that's caused by a lot of people driving cars, the more people we get into bus actually helps productivity. Why we would actually want to try and, I guess, weaken what this collective is trying to achieve is, I'm not too sure I support everything that they are aiming to advocate to the government for, and so that's one of the reasons why I think we shouldn't actually approve the amendment. And I understand a lot of you have indicated your support, but I just want to realise that actually the amendment, supporting the amendment, is trying to weaken what this group is actually trying to achieve. What they want is actually to have transport equity now and ongoing transport equity. We know one of the biggest challenges for our climate change transition is going to become a just transition. We can't trial these things. We need to actually have a step change approach. We need the government, who are talking a lot of words, to actually step up and actually start putting action in places they need to put action, and public transport is one of those places. On that note, Aaron, do you have a seconder for your amendment? Tim seconded it. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Aye. Sorry. Can I just... No's. Just no's for the... Okay, that's... Yeah. Jimmy, Jake, self, Sarah, and Celeste. Mel, were you up or down? Were you no or yes for this?
I am surprisingly.
Okay. I'll put, that's now part of the substantive. I'll now put the whole lot, including the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against? Carried. No, I've done the minutes. Did you guys present this report?
That's right. Hey everyone, I'm Ben Jason, just new to the strategic transport team here.
Great. Right, so what you have in front of you is a very high-level report. It's not normally something that we would bring to council, but this has come as a request from the hearings panel that looked at the Central City parking policy. At the time, this issue was identified through the work that the staff had done as part of that project. And then during the hearings process, the panel decided to pull it out so that we could actually look at it and do a bit more of a deeper dive. So the purpose of this report is outlining a process or a methodology and the criteria so that we can come back to you with a good evidence base so that you can make a decision on what the actual role of these temporary surface parking lots could be in the future. So today we're here to potentially get any feedback on the actual scope itself, any improvements that you might want to add to the criteria or the scope. In terms of timeline, we don't have a timeline for this particular piece of work at the moment. We'll be working in with all the other work that's going on within council, but note that consenting for temporary parking lots is an ongoing process. A lot of them are getting 5-year consents. There is a few that are coming up within the next 12 months or so. That's probably about it.
Thank you. Questions? Tim?
So is this review looking at the 5-year term and concerned about that, or is this?
No, the review is looking at, it's going to gather some evidence and go through an optioneering process so we can come back to you with some proposals, policy proposals on what the role of temporary parking is in the long term, so past 5 years.
So will it also include, like, when we started this journey, it was about shingle car parks and how they detracted from the central city, but now a lot of them, to gain resource consent to move forward and continue, they've done their sites up. So is it also going to include those looking at the positive side of what they've done, as in there are actually some sites that have improved the central city in some areas?
Yeah, so the work will link in with that. What you're talking about was the work that was done under the Vacant Sites program.
Yeah.
And so that has resulted in some positive aspects for the consents themselves. But what we're looking at is it's beyond the consenting process, because at the moment we're in this cycle where every 5 years we get all these consents coming back in.
Yeah.
And at some point we need to make a decision on what we want to do with that process. So that's what this is about.
Yeah. But the process that we're reviewing, we can have a process, we have a strategy, but it's kind of irrelevant if the economic side of things don't equal building a building. So if we turned around and said, for instance, that okay, we're not going to allow central city vacant parking, irrelevant how nice it looks now, even though we've asked you to do it up. But if it's not economically viable to build something, it'll just sit there. So it's got to. So in what we're proposing, it's going to be looking at that.
Yep. So that's on. Well, I'm not sure on what page it is on your agenda, but in the attachment to the report, it's got some draft criteria, and one of them is the economic incentives.
Yeah.
So we will be looking at that.
Because that's really the driver, isn't it, for a property owner?
Yeah, correct.
So, yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Any other questions? Oh, right. Andrew.
Thank you. Paragraph 4.5 in the report tells us that the review will not consider or seek to evaluate the amenity value of the temporary off-street parking. Versus in the table, one of the evaluation criteria is a question, does this option help or hinder regeneration? It's arguable that amenity does have an effect on people's desire to invest in, to use, to plan to use for a variety of purposes, the central city. And therefore, the amenity does play into that regeneration question. I guess my question is, why is amenity value not part of the considerations?
So I think the point of that, the reason that that's in there is because we didn't want to reiterate the Vacant Sites program. But I get your point. Amenity does, play a point in regeneration. So we will be looking at that as part of the criteria, but we're not trying to repeat the Vacant Sites work.
Yeah, I understand that. However, paragraph 4.5 is very clear. The review will not consider or seek to evaluate amenity value. I guess I'm challenging whether that should be a correct statement.
Yeah, I agree with Rand. I think we initially were seeking to keep amenity within the realm of the vacant sites program and keep our review focused on the many other aspects of this review. Economic development, supply and demand of car parking.
So that's the rationale, but if you are asking us to change it, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the point I've made that amenity does affect regeneration outcomes and ultimately investment and economic outcomes suggests that to some degree amenity should be taken into account. I mean, I appreciate there's the other piece of work that's been done, but to totally ignore the effect of poor amenity in particular probably wouldn't be the most useful way of approaching this, would be my view.
Do you want to put a...
So, yeah, what are you suggesting, Andrew?
I'm suggesting that...
Think about it, and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, all right, great. So you're thinking that we should put something up just as maybe a noting provision or something of that nature?
If that's where you want to head, we can have a think, and then we'll just see what the general feel around the room is. Yanni?
Yeah, thanks. So I guess there was two things that I was interested in. That during the hearing, we heard a lot around the economic arguments. So I just want to make sure, because at the time of the hearing, we weren't able to get very detailed economic advice. And so we've got this process underway now. So I just want to make sure that we're going to get a lot of economic understanding about the value, because we heard from both sides. We heard from developers that one of those sites develops for the economic benefits, and then we heard from people that were using those to support the financial viability. So yeah, I just want to, I guess, understand how much we're going to be able to seek that economic analysis of the different options.
We're going to seek as much as we can. I can't answer how much we can. It's challenging. Some of the data is commercially sensitive, so we're going to do the best we can.
Right, okay. And then the second thing is how much can we look at the social responsibility? Like, I understand that there's no regulation of off-street parking in New Zealand, so basically these companies can do whatever they want and treat people however they want, as I understand it. So just in terms of looking at, I guess, that community or social responsibility of the operations, is there any scope that we can have that would inform the review?
Well, we've got that as part of our criteria. We haven't really defined that yet.
Right.
But I would suggest, yes, we would be looking at as much as we can.
So if we could introduce, maybe a code of operations or something, if we do enable people to have a consent.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks.
Jimmy?
Although you have this kind of review, but I'm concerned currently, if we review the paragraph 3.3, 248 temporary off-street parking, 120 sites unconsented. But in the mid-October this year, you mentioned 11 plus 52, get a consent or in the process consent, but still have 57, no consent. How to mitigate those effects, or part of this review or not?
So you're asking about the numbers.
Yeah, number 57.
Numbers are changing every day, so to be honest, I can't comment on the numbers. The resource people, consent people aren't here, but that's not the purpose of this report. It's not to look at the numbers of consents that are coming in the door.
Yeah. Okay.
The purpose of the report is to show us the scope for what they're going to look at as for the role of temporary car parks moving forward. So,
okay.
Phil.
Hi guys. You could call 2026 the end date. I know that they're rolling around and there's somebody. So is it, and you would like to think that by the time 2026 comes along, the economy is so vibrant and good, there is no need for a temporary car park. But if someone has played the game and has got it shingled or even sealed to that point, are they going to be allowed to carry on? Is that where we're aiming? Or are you more or less saying at the end of your next 5-year cycle, that's it?
We're not saying any of that.
Right.
We're doing this work to come back to you so you can decide what to do.
Yeah, okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Excellent. And Andrew, did you have something you want to put forward as?
Yeah, I've got some wording here which you could either add in or deal with as an amendment as you wish.
Yep.
Requests that the scope for the review considers the amenity values of temporary off-street parking.
Thank you. Is there any issues, Rayanne, is there any issues from your point of view with that being added?
No.
Thank you. Add the whole lot as it is? Yep. Sorry, we're just going to confirm Andrew's wording. Andrew,
So requests that the scope for the review considers the amenity values of temporary off-street parking.
That's a bit broad, that's all I would say. Because the amenity value has already been considered in a. So are you asking amenity to be added to the regeneration criteria? Which is a bit more specific?
What I want is wording that means that you do take amenity into account. I realise that it may not have, you may not give it the same weight as you give to some of the other criteria, but you know, I guess what I'm doing is pushing back against that paragraph in the report that I noted where you said you won't consider that at all. I think it needs to be considered to some degree.
Yeah, so can I suggest that your amendment say something about including amenity in the criteria, and the specific it's criteria that says, does this option support the Centre City as a place to work, live, work, shop and socialise?
Yeah.
And it is about regeneration.
All right, so if I then said request that amenity form part of the evaluation criteria,
yes,
that would work.
Be good.
So request that amenity being form part of the evaluation criteria. Does that work for you? That
Yes,
works?
sorry. Yes.
Almost contradicts the statement.
Yeah,
no,
so let's
that's
get rid of everything after the word criteria.
Okay.
Or maybe keep the words for temporary off-street parking. Requested amenity form part of the evaluation criteria for temporary off-street parking. So get rid of everything between the words criteria and for temporary. That's it? Yep, great.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Are you able to, Ryan, that works? Are you happy with that, Andrew?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you want to move the whole lot as it stands?
And I'll second.
You'll second it. So Sarah moving, Andrew second it. Is there any debate on this? Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, I think 4, which Andrew's just put in, is one of the key things here, because this whole journey started with kind of level shingle pits used as car parks. And so the key was to turn them to something that's positive for the central city and the high amenity. So that's what's happened. And they couldn't get resource consent if they didn't do it. So what we should have actually done is be having competitions about who's got the best looking car park. Perhaps we should have looked at it that way. The economic driver for 2026 will drive development of these sites and reduce slowly the car parks, central city car parks that we have. There are a small group of people in the city who will never enter a car park building because of the trauma of the earthquake, and we have never discussed that. So I can see the value of number 4, but I don't think I'll be supporting this because I look around and there are car parks in the central city that were shingle pits that are now looking really good and can be seen as positives to the central city. And the economic development of our city and the climate will drive development. So if we turned around and said, well, actually, we want to stop, or it's not time for central city parking in this type of way, if there's no development or no economic driver for development, they'll just sit there vacant. So I'm not going to support this today.
Thanks, Tim. Andrew.
Thank you. I'm pleased with the extra work included. One of the things that we constantly hear from the community, maybe less so now than we had done in earlier times, and also one of the effects of temporary off-street parking is or can be poor amenity. And there have been, as a result of the vacant sites programme, some significant amenity improvements. Some of those temporary car parks are now looking a whole lot better than they were, but taking a walk around town, it's pretty clear that there's some further work to be done on some of them as well. I was just keen that amenity be included to some degree in the criteria, and I think we've achieved that. Just really noting the comment I made in the question that amenity of the central city in general does have an effect on investment decisions, on decisions that people make on whether they're going to come to the central city for shopping and other activities or go elsewhere. The look and feel of the central city is important, and I think it's important that we consider the effect that these temporary car parks have on that amenity. It does make a difference to what happens next in terms of investment, economics, and all of the other criteria. So please be clear.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other? James.
Yeah, I won't take up much time. I can't say if I agree or disagree with Andrew there because Mike wasn't on. So, but I'm going to guess that he was supporting it, and but I will probably say that I tend to agree with a lot of Tim's comments there. I think that what we need to be acutely aware of is that parking matters. The vast majority of people get around by motor vehicle, and we're kidding ourselves if you think that that the central city isn't in competition with the malls where there is an abundance of free parking. I think that perhaps we're looking at it the wrong way around. Instead of approaching things with the stick, enabling things and allowing competition to flourish. So better looking car parks will be better utilised. We've seen a number of very good quality car parks, some that have had excellent urban design and bring good amenity value. There's also a range of car parking buildings now too, which are very reasonable, clean and tidy and safe, and people most certainly are using them. So look, I back the choice. I also am acutely aware that a number of leases and the ability to secure tenancies, which essentially is what's going to attract people to a central city to recreate and shop and have fun. It's going to be good stuff happening, which draws them in. They've got parking as a condition for those leases. So I think that we're at a stage now where there is some competition there. The better ones will flourish, but I prefer the carrot approach than the stick. So I'm not going to be supporting it. I think that it's too fragile a time right now, particularly with COVID and everything that we've gone through. So agree with Tim, and I won't be supporting recommendations. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak? Yeah.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but now I'm really confused because we already agreed to undertake this work, and all this is endorsing a scope for a review. And if it's voted down, then in fact it requires us to come back and revisit the original decision. I mean, it just seems odd to me that it's got to this point when council's already asked for a review of temporary off-street parking sites. This is the go forward. So we're in a state where we've actually literally approached every single one of the temporary off-street parking sites, which is why we've got a noting provision there around the existing vacant sites program, which has actually, in fact, improved the amenity of off-street car parks already. And that we have then made sure that people have applied for resource consent where the resource consents were coming to an end, and a number of them are having them granted and some of them aren't. So, but we need to make a decision at some stage over the next wee while, and this doesn't prevent us putting that off when it comes back. We're not having a debate about the subject, we're having a debate about gathering the evidence for good decision making. So I can't understand why you would vote against getting the evidence, but you know, that's my take on it. It doesn't seem to make sense other than to support it.
Thank you. Phil?
In my view, the problem that we had of the shingle gravel pit car parks is sorting itself out anyway. So why do we want to go to a whole lot more trouble and send these guys away to do a lot more work when we're nearly there and the system we've got is working? So that's what I can say.
Thanks, Phil. Good debate. Right, before Sarah closes, is there anyone else that wants to speak to this? Okay. Look, I guess want to back what the Mayor said, you know, what the point of this paper is, and I guess it's taken, we're going to adopt an approach which is going to be an evidence-based approach to the role of temporary car parks within the city, and this obviously fell out of the central city parking policy, and you know, there was a lot of submissions in there about the at-grade car parks and the role of them, a lot of them from developers, both in support and against these car parks. You know, and as a council, we decided to go down this path and actually have a look at the role of them. And so this actually ensures that when we come to make a final decision, that decision is based on evidence. I'm not too sure why we would now suddenly say no to trying to take an evidence-based approach, but that's, I guess, the will of some of the councillors, but I will be supporting the recommendations. Sarah, to close.
Thanks so much. I agree with much of what's been said, especially from the Mayor and Chair. I note in 4.3 it says here, until we have gathered and considered all available evidence, we are unable to determine what options may be available for the future of temporary off-street parking sites or the mechanisms through which they could be achieved. And of course, that review may end up finding exactly what Councillor Goff purports will be true, which is that more are needed over time. But without that evidence, we may make decisions, for example, to close them without knowing that. I think that asking for information when we asked staff to come back with this paper with a scope so that we could do this review just makes sense. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thanks. So it's just the three? Okay. Carried.
Can I have that recorded, please, Mr. Chair?
I'm leaving shortly. Eh? Eight. Yeah. Oh, I thought you said 9. You said 9. So it is 8.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyhow, we're going with plan change 8. I'm going to take this as read. I understand the Mayor wants to move this, and I'm happy to second it. Is there any questions before we open it up for debate? No, excellent. Would you like to open the debate?
Thank you very much. Look, I'm really pleased with the work that has been done, and would like to acknowledge the Commissioner for undertaking this work and reporting back to us. It is actually quite a significant achievement in the term of this council to have the Papakainga, Kainga, Nohonga zone provisions introduced into the district plan, and then now for the resolution of the outstanding matters that have prevented development in these areas, picking up on a number of their issues. I note that there weren't many submissions on this, but those that did submit were able to submit very positively. The four runanga, Kokorarata, Wairua, Onuku and Rapaki. And the plan change was also supported by Environment Canterbury and the Banks Peninsula Community Board. Two other submissions, one by a landowner of general land within the zone and the other by a landowner adjoining the zone, supported the plan change in part but sought amendments, and these were addressed in the context of the hearing. I just think this has been an exceptional process. I do think that it is the benefit of having Te Hono Ngā Papatipu Runanga committee established as a standing committee of this council, where the chairs of the Papatipu Runanga come together with the chairs of our committees and other representatives sitting around the table as councillors. It is a new way of working. It is a form of co-governance which enables a really strengthened approach when it comes to dealing with matters that bring Te Ao Māori into direct relationship with our, for example, district planning processes or the RMA. I just would like to thank everyone in the council staff who've worked so hard behind the scenes, including our treaty relationship manager, who has also spearheaded a very strong working relationship with Mahana Nui, Kurataio Limited, MKT as they're known, and the individual Papatipu Runanga. So I'm really thrilled to be able to move this resolution today. It means a lot to me.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to talk? Andrew.
Thank you. This is significant, and I'd like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this from a wide range of people over a reasonably long period of time. What this means is that the Papakainga and Nohoanga zone provisions that were introduced into the district plan can now actually be put into effect and used in the way that they were intended to be. So looking at this in the context of Rapaki, which is probably the zone which is going to be most positively affected by this change, it means that the site setbacks are changed in a way that actually allows for buildings to be built, for residential activity to take place, in the way that the zoning allowed, but the setbacks didn't. So this actually resolves, I think, what many of us would see as an unintended outcome from the introduction of the zone in the beginning. That was something to celebrate at that time, but the fact that it actually can be able to be put into effect now in the way that was originally intended is definitely something to celebrate today.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll adjourn to 11:20. Okay. which is item 9, National Policy Statement on Urban Development, Well-Functioning Urban Environment and Qualifying Matters. Welcome, Emily and Mark. I'll let you introduce this item before we move on to questions.
Thank you. So staff have been working with you in recent months to progress a package of changes to the Christchurch District Plan required to implement the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. The changes will enable greater intensification of housing. By law, we need to notify this plan change by August 2022. Today is the first formal step in this overall process. We're asking you to confirm all of the matters relevant for well-functioning urban environment and qualifying matters that we can look at, can look to include in the district plan changes. The qualifying matters identified are areas of the city are unsuitable for enabling more housing under the government's new rules. We are also asking you to endorse that staff continue to investigate these matters further to make sure we have sufficient and site-specific evidence to make sure they are eligible for inclusion in the Christchurch District Plan. The qualifying matters include some aspects already protected in the current district plan, such as significant trees, residential character areas, and hazard areas. We know that trees are important to you and the community. The RMA is very limited in how we protect trees. Through the district plan, we protect trees as best as we can, and this is through the scheduled trees in Appendix 9 of the district plan. We are not able to provide a blanket tree protection. Through the qualifying matters, we are picking up this schedule. If the schedule was to be updated through a future plan change, this would get picked up as a qualifying matter. Additionally, as part of applying the new bill, staff are investigating the possibility of using new financial contributions tools with regards to tree canopy cover. This work is in its early stages as we wait to see what the final wording of the new bill is likely to be. We propose considering additional qualifying matters that relate to infrastructure constraints, such as wastewater networks, the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan blueprint, and emergency radio communication pathways. If you approve this work continuing, we will return in February next year to provide more details and thereafter ask for your approval to seek feedback from our community in the second quarter of next year. The feedback will inform the plan change that we will eventually be formally notifying before the government's August 22 deadline.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on this? No, Yanni.
Yeah, thanks. So just in regards to the tree canopy and also the urban forest plan, are we able to get a sense of if we wanted to strengthen our tree protection, what sort of evidence or process do we need to do to get better protection?
So the RMA is quite limited, and it needs to be site-specific trees that are protected. We can't do blanket tree protections through the RMA.
Right.
So in development of the district plan review, the proposed district plan was subject to review a number of years ago. Yes. There was evidence compiled on every individual tree of the values that it provides. So that includes a number of aspects, including heritage. Some trees, for instance, were planted in commemoration of an event. Amenity was another. And those various values require some assessment and would be necessary for any additions to the tree schedule.
Right. And do you have a sense of how many trees lost protection through the district plan review, approximately? Like, did we lose a lot of tree protection? Or?
Would need to come back to you on that.
So if we want to, so the best way to protect trees is to get them identified individually and then put into our district plan as significant. So given that that's one of the qualifying matters we're going to government with, are we able to set up a parallel process to start doing that now?
The updating of the tree schedule would require that evidential basis. To progress a plan change would require additional resource that we don't have and shifting resource away from existing priorities. So that would require further work. As and when that plan change takes effect, that would constitute a qualifying matter in the context of the national policy statement.
Back to us, can we get advice? I mean, I'm just worried we're waiting to early 2022. Like,
that's next month, early 2022, or probably February. So
yeah,
well,
I mean, reality is
away from
it's
22.
going to be.
Yeah, I think Yanni, that everyone shares your concerns about. Well, maybe not everyone, but most people will share your concern about the loss of our tree canopy and actually how low it is to start with. I think it's really important as elected members we actually get a briefing. So that's obviously been identified, and we're trying to have that as soon as possible.
Can I just check?
So that will include around protecting trees. Like, we can't, try and make resolutions in this setting.
But I get that. But we had a briefing previously where staff actually outlined a huge number of benefits of trees, and the issues with trees. And this was came out of the tree policy hearing where we actually asked for advice. I guess what I'm concerned about is just having another briefing telling us what we already know doesn't progress getting the work done. So is it possible to just get a memo back around what the likely cost of a district plan change would be, so that we can be informed for the draft annual plan, so that there's actually something tangible? And I guess the other concern is that I'm worried that we don't have enough resource for the urban forest plan, because that's falling behind schedule as well. So, I mean, I'm just interested in actually getting tangible action rather than just another briefing, because I think we kind of know what the issues are.
We staff will put a memo together for you and outline the cost of a plan change for protecting trees.
And I know also that the staff have sent a memo around updating the tree canopy with iTree, or the iTree, which is with the university now. But just in terms of like the qualifying matters, I was just interested in coming up with a mechanism where we could look at addressing the inequity that exists in some suburbs around the lack of tree canopy. So is that, when that briefing comes back, would that be able to identify additional qualifying matters that we can submit to government?
The inequity of tree cover, there's an option of addressing that through greater planting of trees in those areas where there's deficiencies, but that would be outside the district plan.
Sorry, I guess what I meant, just at a high level, say, for example, we suggested a qualifying matter that said in certain areas where we've got very little or low tree canopy that's in decline, significant decline because of infill and intensification, that we restrict the amount of densification that can happen subject to trees being protected. E.g., there's parts of the city that we know where there is a lack of trees, and the trees that are there are being removed at a far greater rate that's having a really negative impact. So could we have something that kind of identified those areas and put greater protection into existing trees in terms of requirements for intensification?
What you're suggesting in the context of the district plan would be to say that trees in areas that are deficient in tree cover have a greater value than trees in areas where there's a greater number. Is that what you're suggesting?
Effectively making it harder for areas that have low tree canopy coverage at the moment to have trees removed. Yeah.
So the assessment of values of individual trees across the city does not take account of equity, and there's a question in my mind of the appropriateness of doing that in the context of the purpose of the Resource Management Act isn't about managing equity per se. It's about sustainable management. And
so, but from an environmental point of view, there's areas in the city that lack the environmental sustainable benefits that trees provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was just interested if we could identify geographic areas which have lower tree canopy at the moment and put some greater restrictions on what can be done. But
my advice to the council on that would be that it wouldn't stack up as a reasonably arguable qualifying matter under the NPS, because under the NPS, the qualifying matters are broadly matters of national significance, and then there's a catch-all one at the end that says any other matter that makes high-density development inappropriate in an area. But the requirements for identifying that qualifying matter include very site-specific analysis that identifies the site to which the qualifying matter relates and evaluates the specific characteristics on a site-specific basis to determine the spatial extent where intensification needs to be compatible with a specific matter. Well, and the specific matter you're describing is an absence of trees. And I have significant doubt that we'd be able to get that home under that sort of assessment criteria. We can give that a fuller assessment if you'd like and bring it back in the briefing.
I don't know how others feel. I think it would be useful because what we know is that we've shallow trenched with a navel, which prevents us from planting a lot of trees in the public space now as well. So anything that we could look at in terms of when we get the tree canopy data in, to looking at how we address that imbalance. There's been lots of research that's come out with Radio New Zealand. There's been people that have been interviewed about the impact of lack of tree canopies in communities and what it means in terms of well-being.
I totally understand that, but what this paper is about is something called a qualifying matter as defined in a specific piece of regulation. And the question I'm asking myself is whether this matter would stack up as a qualifying matter. And I really doubt that it would.
The question's been asked and answered. I think we all understand there is an issue of trees that we're trying to address. Can we move on to another?
Just to clarify though, I thought the idea of having site-specific qualifying matters, the question really is, can a site be more than just one or two dwellings? Could it apply to a area unit, for example? So I thought that would be good to get answered. Just get some advice back.
The site is at a parcel level, so a site is down to a parcel level, so individual properties is the scale that would need to provide information for a qualifying matter.
Pauline.
Yeah, just quickly, it's a little bit outside this, but do we have a definition of a notable tree that you could send round, circulate?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And my question is that in the new NPS, it states that the rules around intensification, one of the rules, must preserve some outlook from buildings. Now, what does that mean? What is an outlook? Could it be an outlook onto trees? So, I mean, that could be part of it, obviously. I mean, does it mean you're looking at more than just the next door building's wall?
I think it's a little bit hard for officers to answer that question right here. I'm sure they can have a look at
but
what
you
the
know where I'm
definition would be
heading
and
with it, that maybe we could build in that, hey, wouldn't it be good if you could look out on some trees or a tree?
My understanding of outlook is it's more about the space to open a window, so it's that kind of to provide that there
it's
is
not
actually.
Outlook, it's only a window.
So can we just get sorry?
We'll need
can we
I'll
just
need
get
to look at
a
that
confirmation of what the definition of outlook is?
Or if there is
Pauline?
one. If there is one.
Yeah.
Any other?
Thank you.
Anne. Mike, Anne.
4.2, I'm just trying to find it. You may consider some other qualifying matters as they arise to investigate further. Can you give us an idea of what they might be? Have you got any thoughts, or will they just...
So we wanted to make sure that there was some ability to capture anything that's raised through public engagement or aspects that come up as we start progressing a little bit more detailed analysis of this work. There isn't anything at the moment that we've identified that we would carry through as a qualifying matter. If we have identified it, it's in the list.
Thank you. And we have talked about excellent urban design and those sorts of things. Do you feel confident that those sorts of things are implicit in what we're saying here, that that's what we are asking for, through this?
So the urban design aspects that we would be looking to bring through in the intensification work would likely be in how we frame up the objectives, policies and provisions for the high density and medium density chapters that we'd be looking to work through as part of this intensification plan change. So that's where those provisions would likely sit. We'll have to see what the new bill allows us to put forward with regards to that. So that's something we submitted on through our council's submission.
Yes, that's right. We did. Okay, thank you. And just, we talked about DCs and offering incentives to developers to do certain things that we'd like them to do. Where does that sit in here?
So the DC policy is an LG policy, so that's sitting outside of the Resource Management Act, and we are doing a bit of work, so we will need to look at that policy to make sure that it's compatible with the new direction that we're providing through this intensification plan change. And we're also, because we're bringing in financial contributions, or potentially looking at bringing in financial contributions, as the new bill has provided us that opportunity. So we'll be looking at DCs in relation to that as well, make sure we're not double dipping.
Thank you, Anne. All right, I'm happy to move these resolutions. Do I have a seconder? Jimmy, open up for debate. Who would like to speak first? No one? Excellent. I'll put...
Just quickly, I think it's really good. I just would really like you to build in something about into the consultation, particularly about that definition of outlook, and preferring it to be more than just being able to open a window. So I think if we could get some feedback, public feedback on that, would be really, really helpful to us, and what the expectation would be of the definition of an outlook and what it would be. Thank you.
Yeah,
welcome.
Yeah,
I almost had it through too. Yanni.
So just to reflect on the previous debate around public transport, like in terms of the debate about a trial, but we have a climate change emergency. Every day that goes past, we're losing more and more trees in the city. We have to act now. The longer we leave it doing anything tangible, the worse that our environmental outcomes are. So, I just really want to encourage councillors to support efforts to address the tree canopy issue in our city. We are not one of the, despite being called the Garden City, we do have a lack of tree canopy compared to other cities around the country. And we also have, in a lot of the infill and intensive housing areas over the last 2 decades, have seen a huge loss in mature trees. And the environmental impact of that is generational. It's not something that you can just fix overnight. So please support the efforts around protecting our trees and enabling more mature trees to be retained in our city. It's really important for the environment, and we actually don't have a lot of time, because we've already seen, just in the time between the tree policy hearing and today, a huge number of trees getting destroyed, and a huge impact in terms of the environment. So I appreciate the work staff are doing on this. I appreciate that central government have a much bigger role to play than what we can, but we also have things that we can do if we choose to prioritise it, and the time is to act now, not wait for later. Thank you.
Anne.
thank you. We all understand that we don't have a lot of power in a lot of this, but it's really important that we identify the areas that we do have a voice in, and really make sure that we do everything we can to control the quality of the builds, the way that we want our communities to be, to protect our trees. It's a huge issue that's repeatedly being brought to us by our concerned residents. So it's going to be interesting to see as we engage with the public how those kind of messages coming through. And it's good to hear that there's an ability for staff to actually consider those things as they come through. So thank you for the work.
Right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, say aye. Sorry, hang on. No, Aaron?
Thanks, Mike. I just want to quickly say that trees don't have to be incompatible with development, and I encourage every councillor at this table to search their favourite cities around the world and look at their tree canopy cover, compare it to our city, because most of them will probably be higher. I'd be surprised if you found one that wasn't, at least it's in the middle of a desert. And then and then look at the density of population in those cities, and you'll see that that's far higher than here. So there's trees with way better cities with way better canopy cover with much higher densities. So the two can go hand in hand. And so look up your favourite cities, look what they've done, and let's take some lessons.
Thank you, Aaron. Actually, totally agree with what you said. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Just a question, and I discussed this with Yanni during the break. The question that Yanni and I have been asking since the beginning of Christchurch doing bus priorities is to see some evidence around how much that's increased patronage, because that's the purpose of it, is to increase patronage, and some evidence because since the first ones went in, nearly half the number of people are on buses.
Yeah, and we've talked...
And just to expand on that, because you can probably answer the question more holistically, sorry, is that also this morning we were discussing buses and how do we actually get people on buses, and wouldn't this money be better spent on something like that that will see people on buses rather than a bus lane? Sorry.
That's fine. Can I just take a moment to introduce John? Many of you know John, but he's just been appointed as our PT infrastructure principal. So is looking to get a holistic view over the whole program that we've got, of all of it, and help us work through that. I'm going to jump in and talk to that a little bit because we have talked about it before, and yes, we have an upcoming briefing that we're going to talk to some of that. However, the thing to understand with the evidence is a lot of the bus priority measures that we currently have in place around the city, we put in pre-earthquake and with a different route system in place. So there's been a lot of change in this city since the earthquakes, and so it's pretty hard to provide you with some of that evidence. Okay, and we do know that bus patronage numbers are declining. What I will get together over the next, we'll do a piece of work to get together the evidence, and we will need to look around the world at evidence. And we've talked about this before as well, that research shows that if you improve reliability, it's a combination of all of these things. You improve reliability. It's got to be a quicker, it's got to be an easier route to work than jumping in your car. And so it's got to be easier to get to work on a bus or by bike or some other means than it is by car to get people to change their habits. I know. So, because that's what we are looking to get people to do, is to change what they would normally do, to choose to take a bus. So we're working on that, and part of that is the bus priority program of work. And it is not just about bus lanes, it is also about getting through intersections, bus gates, jumping queues. There's all sorts of interventions that can be done. So can I hold the answer to the question until we get the briefing early in the new year and we get ECAN on board as well?
So shouldn't we have had the briefing before the decision?
This is not. This is based on what has been programmed from the PT Futures program, and you've had briefings on that. So we are updating you again, providing you more information. You've had a lot of this information in the past.
Because in a climate emergency, we should be spending our money wisely, getting the best bang for the buck. That's kind of where my question was.
Yeah, and investing in PT is. You've told us is that.
And sorry, this fund that we're looking at right now,
yes,
is actually targeted to exactly what we're actually putting it to.
Yes, it is. So,
which was actually a condition
of the investment case. So the investment case in this program, the investment case that went to Treasury to get the $40 million from government, from the CRAF funding, is to spend $5 million on projects identified in the PT Futures business case, which you endorsed in December last year.
So Lynette, just
so that's
to
what
be
this is about.
Clear, obviously the city's been through a rough time with the earthquake, and also the bus network change, so it makes it difficult to actually get some good evidence. But the research
we're working on it.
Backs this, and there will be international evidence around actually bus priority lanes and the effectiveness of it, and we'll be having a briefing in the new years just to go over PT as well, which will involve ECAN, broad PT pitches, not just this. Do you have a question, Zara?
Yeah, so just to follow on from the point you made before about the continual improvements. So all the spending over the last 10 years to create those efficiencies and make it, a better service has not resulted in an increase in numbers. So are you saying for the last 10 years we've not spent the money wisely?
No, I'm not saying that. We have spent the money wisely and we've done the best we can, but this is not a debate as staff we can really enter into in this environment. We will come to you with a briefing and provide you with the evidence of why we plan to do what we're doing. You as a council, through your long-term plan and annual plan processes, have told us that PT is important, and there's worldwide evidence that, and you've signed up to the climate change emergency, which says we need to change our travel patterns and how we travel. We need to reduce emissions. So we need to encourage people to get on different modes. So it's a big and complex story that we are building on. But this is not for, I can't debate this with you here.
And you don't need to debate with council.
Just questions.
Yeah. Right, so do we have any, Yanni?
Thanks. Do we have a long list of like the actions in terms of the PT business case that we're responsible for?
When it was endorsed, it was roughly about this time last year. There was three key things that were taken out of it for the next 3 years, and one of which was progressing, working with ECAN on providing infrastructure for routes 17 and 28, which they're currently up for consultation on, and councils in behind that in February, March with their infrastructure consultation. Continuation with Lincoln Road bus priority, which was previous LTP agreed items, and that's progressing, and that'll be to work in conjunction with increased frequency with their partners ECAN. And the other key thing in the next 3 years is building integration between the development of the RTI system, which is real-time information on the buses, to integrate with their traffic signals network, and that'll give us opportunities to, essentially it means that when a bus is approaching a signalised junction, it can talk to it, it knows it's there, and then if it meets certain criteria, it potentially can give it priority. So that's a really good value for money improvement that we can deliver.
So just looking.
So the key three things, and then generally on top of that there would be the bus interchange, and then there's a program of bus priority improvements, and the CRAF fund that we've got from the Crown gives us the ability to bring the bus priority forward. And essentially the priorities we've established there is where we've got an identified problem with congestion, which contributes to, if we can get around that, contributes to improving the reliability of the bus service, which, in conjunction with increased frequency and other measures, provides the best opportunity to create an improvement which drives patronage and creates a better option for people.
Right. So just looking at the investment case, there's 7 intersection improvements. Could we not just choose to fund those through here?
So they're quite broad, and the business case is done at a high level. So there's quite a big gap between that and defining exactly what we've got to do. So in the context of the whole business case, intersections are quite a small value. So we can look at them holistically and do them together as one, and deliver them together, because they also coincide with other projects that are coming up as well. So it makes sense for us to look at them as one whole.
So each of the intersections will get done.
So that's 1.9.8 says bus transfer intersections improvements and minor works on all routes.
Yeah, 1 to 7. So is all the money that we've got going to go to all of those? Are they all being done, all 7?
No, so we've got there's $5 million in there that we've got a period of time to spend, and it's likely that some of these projects, for a number of different reasons, may be delayed, or they may go over the $5 million budget. So we need to have a level of flexibility and agility so we can move to another one. And the bus transfer intersections, they're relatively low value, so we want to be in a position where we've got them fully schemed and designed, so we can make a decision on whether we implement them in conjunction with these other projects. So the first year of work is essentially scheming, investigation, and potentially taking some to consultation.
I just it would have been good to maybe have a workshop on this, but
This is actually in line with the LTP that we approved just recently, Yanni, and also in line with the PT futures. Anne, did you have a question?
I just wanted to confirm that this discussion that we're having and the decisions that we're making here are because we endorsed that Greater Christchurch Public Transport Futures business case in December of last December. So you're just doing what we've asked you to do.
Correct, yes.
Right.
And these projects are aligned with that, and it gets us in front.
So the debate about what we do has actually happened. We've actually made that decision, and you're just implementing it with what we've got here. Right,
yes.
Great.
And there'll be further discussions.
Just clarify that.
Are these unraveled as well?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Yanni.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask too, on a separate issue, is the toilet facilities for drivers. We were going to install 12 toilets at new bus.
Sorry, is that part of the CRAF funding? No, you cannot answer that.
It is. It's in the business case.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not.
No, I just wanted to ask, given that we've heard, we've just seen bus routes getting cut because of the frequency, because of the driver shortage.
Sorry.
And there's legal requirements.
Yanni.
Are we responsible for the toilets?
Yanni.
We're not responsible.
Can we just...
This
Are you actually in a position to answer that question?
The business case is, you need to understand, the business case is a joint business case between us, ECAN. It's a Greater Christchurch business case, PT Futures. We have picked out the infrastructure-based projects as identified in the Treasury investment case for CRAF. It said infrastructure to improve bus priority. So we're going down that path. There are other parts of that business case that have been worked through, the Greater Christchurch PT Futures business case, that'll be worked through by joint agencies.
Don't get the two business cases confused. Yeah. Right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to go into debate. Does anyone want to debate this? Sarah? Okay, you want to close it? Okay, Andrew?
Thank you. I think it's been made clear once again from staff that bus priority improvements are about increased reliability and reduced journey times, and that in turn is the thing that would be expected to increase patronage. Now, on my Facebook page, there's a photograph of a bus which is on Riccarton Road. And notably, on the front of that bus and on the back of it, there is an electronic sign with 3 words, "Sorry, bus full." Now, that doesn't suggest that buses are running around the city empty. The 28X service, this is the express service from Littleton into the central city that runs every morning. is often full. That service is fast, takes about 20 to 25 minutes, and it's reliable. It's actually faster than driving. And it's not a stretch of the imagination to expect that that speed and that reliability are at least some of the reasons why that particular service is so popular. Again, that doesn't suggest that buses are running around the city empty. ECAN are currently consulting on improving the frequency of the 28 service, not just the express, but the whole service, as a result of high demand and high use. Again, that doesn't suggest that buses are running around the city empty. Last time I went to Church Corner, from here, I deliberately took the bus. I walked to the super stop at the hospital, I took the bus. I counted the number of cars I passed as I went along the very effective bus lane along Rickerton Road, and I stopped counting when I got to 30. I got to my destination at Church Corner far faster than I would have done if I'd driven, and I didn't have to worry about parking when I got there. We do need to be realistic. So there's some examples of what is working and how if we do more of this, things can work better. But we do need to be realistic. The earthquakes saw the central city in particular not operating normally for a number of years. PT previously had run around a central hub, the old bus exchange in the central city. It's pretty understandable that when people were working in industrial areas rather than the central city, they found it easier to drive than use buses. That's one reason why not only did people not use PT at that time, but they also got out of the habit. We've just come through, and in fact, we're still in COVID with restrictions that meant people weren't using public transport. Actually, people were restricted from and pretty anxious about using public space in general, let alone public transport. Not difficult again to see why people at that time might choose not to take public transport if they're concerned about the restrictions or indeed about catching COVID. But using the excuse that not enough people use public transport to support an argument that we shouldn't invest in PT infrastructure so that people do use it is actually a circular argument that can only possibly end up with the negative result that people don't use public transport. Investing in PT infrastructure is the step change that will get people onto the buses, and I've given you some really good examples of where that's working extremely well.
Anne.
Yeah, kia ora. Well said, Andrew. I think that we heard from people this morning who really want to use the buses, and we need to to invest to make them more efficient and to make them cheaper. We don't have any control over the reducing the fares, but we've supported people who are working on this. But we can make our system, our public transport system, we can work to make it more efficient and quicker so that people will see it as attractive and will use it. So thank you for the work that's being done here. I'm sure that it will achieve what we want to achieve through it. Thank you.
Yanni.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we do need to invest in public transport, but I'm just not convinced that what's been put in front of us is going to make a big difference. You know, there were 7 intersections that were identified in our intersection improvement program, and I get no certainty from the resolution we're passing that these will be done in a timely manner. The toilet issue alone, we should all be concerned about driver welfare, particularly because it's having a real impact on what we're trying to achieve. And yet we're not even allowed to talk about the infrastructure required for drivers. We heard through the LTP the importance of the bus lounges. So we've got one in Rickerton, but we weren't allowed to access this funding for a bus lounge in Eastgate, Linwood or the Palms. And it just seems to me like, really, in terms of this funding, the other thing that we should be doing is looking at the areas that have had their bus services cut. Some of the recommendations in this report were around adding, realigning routes through Bromley, Linwood, Woolston, Aranui. We know that in Aranui, for example, that there is a undersupply of public transport and a lack of PT infrastructure. This is again mentioned in our business case that we agreed, but it actually doesn't. The acceleration funding that we're bringing forward doesn't actually address any of that. So I just don't think this money is going to the right place. I won't be supporting this today. I think we actually do need to think about the intersection improvements. They make sense. We've already identified them But we need to get the evidence around the impact of bus priority versus those other things that we hear that can also make a difference, which is reliability, comfort. But, a number of people in my area are complaining that the buses just aren't showing up on the scheduled timetable. It's good that we're investing in the real-time information, although there's been huge problems with that as well in the past. But fundamentally, I just think, we should have workshopped this. We should have all had an opportunity to look at what the whole list of priorities was and what the effectiveness was of each intervention before we agreed to fund this money.
Phil.
I think this is great. Staff have done a lot of work on these intersections, and the best thing about it is that we are finally spending some of the CRAF money, which the third letter is accelerate, and we've probably been sitting on it for a number of years since we've got it, probably even 4, but it's taken a while to get it to this point, and I think it's great. It's not our dough. Well, we haven't come up with it. Ratepayers haven't paid for it. Government nicely gave it to us. We're spending it. It's going to make intersections better and safer and faster, so it's good.
Thank you, Phil. I'll be supporting these recommendations. I think we're just going to be a little bit careful not to look at one business case without looking at the actual investment cases as well. There's certain things we can do and there's certain things we can't do. This is coming not just from the CRAF investment case, but also the PT Futures business case that as a council we endorsed, and obviously that led to the LTP decisions. All the work has been done to actually try and slow it down to relitigate work that we've had clear direction and evidence from people that actually are qualified to speak on this matter is just absurd, because like Phil said, this is about acceleration and we don't want to be slowing it down actually at a point of time where we're ready to spend the money. So I support these, and I'll let Councillor Templeton close.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of bus priority. This morning we had some great deputations around creating equity in transport around free fares, and that would get people on buses. I'd love to hear some people coming in saying, telling us their stories about bus priority and how that would make them catch the bus, because the evidence would suggest that they haven't. And yeah, thanks for speaking up there, Andrew, because it reminded me of what you said before, and it's good to hear that you'd seen a bus on Riccarton Road with a full bus sign. When I was a kid, they were everywhere. That was very common. You're always standing in the bus. Buses are old technology and not working for a modern city. We need to, if we are going to reduce carbon, we should not have 40-seater vehicles driving around the city with no one on them. And I know you'll say, oh no, there's lots of people on the buses. Not going to your area, Andrew, because I'm often down on a power road and see the buses going past with no one on them. I take photos and send them to fellow councillors and say, look, another bus with no one on it. So that's a large diesel vehicle burning carbon, increasing our carbon footprint, and next week the council increases its carbon footprint again, yet we're not walking the talk. We need a more efficient public transport system, one that does create equity, and looking backwards and saying, let's force more people onto buses is not going to do it. And the sooner this council realises that and starts actually reducing our carbon footprint, the better we will do for the planet. Because I hear a lot of people decrying that we need to do these things, but we're not actually doing them. The numbers are not there to support it, so we should not be doing it. I supported the free buses this morning because that, if we did it for a year, we could then actually see a tangible increase in the numbers of people on buses, and I would love to see that. But doing all this other hard work, hard infrastructure work to try and get people on buses, there's no evidence to suggest that that will work in this city. May work in other cities where I've heard councillors quote cities overseas comparing them to ours with 20 times the population density. You're comparing apples with a mince pie. It's completely different for your diet. So start to be more realistic, and to put 2% of the population in one lane and everyone else in the other is just deliberately causing congestion, which is deliberately increasing our carbon footprint. So start walking the talk, Christchurch.
Sam, you've got an amendment you want to put forward?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. Look, this just, I don't disagree with what's been said on both sides of the argument, to be really honest. But I was kind of thinking, in way of compromise, potentially I could just signal an amendment that just sits as 4, which just notes the committee's direction that these projects are to only, I guess the craft funding is ring-fenced to this, so should they exceed budget, then we just prioritise. So it's just putting a bit of discipline in the system where actually the government money that we're spending is tied to this, but no more council or ratepayer money is tagged to these projects, because some of the... Well, hang on. I mean, can I finish, Sarah, for once? The advice from staff is potentially there are some within it that may not exceed. So I just sort of a good compromise would be to...
Thanks, Sam. I'll see if there's a seconder that hasn't spoken, but I just want a clarification, because my understanding actually these are actually budget lines already with council funding on them.
Yep.
Is that correct?
But if it's craft funding, we can set an expectation that doesn't exceed
You're more than welcome to move that. Amanda, I just want to clarify.
Fair.
There is actually already council funding for these projects. So it's not so much that we want to just spend the 5 million and that's it. We want to actually try and save 5 million of the council funding, but then still do the whole program of works. But I'm happy for you to put that forward as an amendment, because you haven't spoken yet. Thank you.
Cool.
Do you want to?
Yeah, shall I just email something while Melanie talks? If that's,
I'm happy to second that. I think it sounds very sensible, and I haven't spoken yet.
Didn't realise you were there. Okay. Do you want to wait till that amendment's up before you speak, Mel? No. Okay.
I wasn't going to say anything either, but public transport isn't necessarily just buses. This does say bus priority, but there's no reason to think that in the future it might not be a bus, it might be something else. So these sorts of initiatives don't, stop those sorts of things happening in the future. So that's all I wanted to say, because this isn't really about buses per se, this is about public transport.
Thank you. I'm just going to wait till Sam has that. Yes, you can ask a question of clarification. Lynette, sorry, there's a question coming your way.
So,
or is it coming to...
What Sam's saying is it more than the 5 mil? Have we thrown money at it as well, or is it just the government money? I'm just a bit lost.
That's a question of staff.
No. For these one here, $5 million will cover it. There's some in there, for example, Ferry Road, which is that's a significant portion to construct that. So it makes sense at the moment to do some investigations to get us in a position to act in the next NLTP period. So the Ferry Road one wouldn't be able to be constructed in the next 3 years, but the majority of the balance would be able to be completed within the next three years.
But to be clear, there are line items in the LTP out beyond this 3-year LTP period that cover all of these projects.
So
there's a program of work. There's a future program of work planned.
Yes.
That covers all of these. That covers the PT program and aligns with the PT Futures business case. But it is out in the future, and we're bringing this back to get it done.
Bringing it back because of this
because
money.
of the CREF funding.
And
So
that's
it
always
will
been
effectively save
saving
council.
us money in the future, so we'll have some left over.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Question on the amendment? Yep.
Question on the amendment for staff. So if this was passed, does that mean that, so for some of these projects, this is the 5 million's covering sort of preliminary work for future council things. If this passed, would that mean that we could do the planning work and then never actually do the projects themselves? Because it's limiting these projects to only craft funding. Would that be the direction that was given?
No, I think...
Can you scroll up a bit, because Jamie's in the way of it, down the bottom. Oh, sorry, scroll down, or whichever. If the amendment, so if the project grouping does not exceed the craft funding intended for public transport.
Sorry, what's for the officers?
On
What
the
is the risk of this? Is there any risk to this amendment?
Does it mean
for
that
the program of work that
So
from one?
So, for example, for Ferry Road, we do some planning and those kind of things as part of this.
But if
But then
it's-
there's actual council funding for Ferry Road later on. Does this mean that we wouldn't then be able to do the work from the council funding? But this amendment would say don't do it.
The amendment would actually remove the funding from the long term.
The ability for us to do the work.
Yep.
Done, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Bigger projects and not that I have a big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a
It's not
there is a
clear from-
risk that that's not clear to me. I'm a bit.
Well, sure there are. Yanni doesn't want action on climate change, so it's all good.
No order. That's outrageous.
Sorry,
I'm totally
Point of
over
debate,
it.
there's no
Oh,
points
I
of
didn't
order.
even hear, so I can't.
Isn't our last
We
debate
are
you were like, we
looking
need to do
to-
everything
Sorry,
possible?
If we can provide some comfort, we are looking to manage this as a grouping and not exceed the budget and do as much work as we can with the $5 million we've got. We can report on it as a grouping and make sure we come back. But there are other projects, but some of these projects are future funded,
Yeah.
the bulk of it. So some of it is just to do planning and development, and the future funding for that is in future years of the LTP.
For
And
the
that is council
intersections
only,
now,
but
then.
to continue with those, we would be coming back to report on them anyway.
So sorry, can I just get one last clarification? Can we just scroll whatever up or down to the list of projects that you've identified? Oh, it's just the minutes, is it?
Let's go to the report.
So in the report, the list of projects,
So it'd be
1.91 to 1.98, that what you're actually planning to do will be able to be done within the $5 million CRAF.
Potentially, Ferry Road won't. The construction of Ferry Road won't fit in it. So the 7 above that will most likely fit within the 5 million, and Ferry Road would just be for planning only, and the balance of the work would have to be done in the later parts of the LTP.
Okay. So that's the risk that councillors are aware of. If
Yeah.
they agree to it, Ferry Road may not get finished. Sorry, you've already spoken. Yep, sure.
So my understanding is in the business case, the bus stop the intersection improvements will cost 18.7 million. So, like, I'm just in terms of the amendment that's being put, just trying to understand how much money, because we just were told that all these projects would be done through the CRAF funding, but clearly they won't because
So these are
it exceeds.
portions. So the money you're talking about is across the whole 10-year program.
Right.
And this CRAF program are taking portions of that, where the greatest problem is where we can deliver something for value now and spend the $5 million. So most effectively.
The budget stuff I'm still finding really confusing. Like if you take 1.98, just to be really clear, it says bus transfer intersection improvements, minor works, all routes. That's 18.7 million. If we approve the CRAF funding, what happens? Does all that other money come forward to do all of those?
No.
It's not. There's
So we need to be really clear on this. This is that's Mike. That's John. John said this at the start. This is to bring forward, and he said it just again. This is to do portions on these routes where the biggest problem is, where we will get the best bang for our buck, which is part of the whole philosophy of CRAF, is getting bang for your dollar, dealing with the biggest problems first. Around the intersections, and it says on the at 1.9.8, it is about minor works around the intersection. So we can do minor works to create better movement through the intersections. It's not about full big scale intersection upgrades, which is some of what was in the.
Yeah. Sorry, just to be clear though, in terms of the amendment, the money that we're getting from CRAF is 5 million, and the total investment case for us is 115 million. So if the amendment passes, does that mean we take 110 million off budget?
So when it was when all the advice was given to council last year, the total portion of PT included the CRAF. So we got a recommendation from the business case which suggested a level of investment, and we showed how that was reflected in our LTP, and we talked about through our consultation documents, etc., that CRAF was going to pay for a portion of it.
Sorry, I'm just not sure what the
Sorry,
amendment
Yanni, I'm going to adjourn so we can get some advice down from legal, unless legal's here, just on this. Actually, what I'm going to do while we wait for that advice is I'm just going to lay this on the table and go to the next item. We'll come back to this.
Except we need to link to the next item.
How long will it take? How long is it going to take? So we're not going to adjourn. We're going to move on, and we'll come back to that. All right, thank you, Lynette. We'll take the report as read, and I understand there has been a number of questions on the from Councillor Johansson on the lighting, LED lighting. So I'd like to give him an opportunity to ask you the questions, and then staff can respond, and then we'll just see where we go to from there. So Yanni, do you want to ask your questions, please?
Thank you. So I was just really concerned at the installation of the LED lights ahead of the research being complete. I understand it was a 3-year program with NIWA, Council, MB, NZ. Oh, sorry, not MB. It was MB, University of Canterbury, Christchurch City Council, NZTA, and LINZ, and that research has been going on for nearly 3 years, and it was looking at the LED conversion and also the in the red zone. So I just wanted to find out like what's happening with that research. When is it going to be reported back to us, and what could we do in the meantime to not mean that we'd have to go back after the research comes out, given that we've seen both Dunedin and Hamilton go to a lower light level for LEDs? So how can we minimise the risk of having to go and reinstall LED lights of a lower level?
Jeff here is going to talk to that. Can I just provide some clarity to the committee? We're not talking about light levels, we're talking about light colour.
Yeah.
So they're different things, so please make sure we try and keep that clear. Okay. There's light colour, there's light levels, they're all different factors in this. And the designs that we do are holistic, and they look at everything. We are not and have not started installation in big significant areas like Birdlings Flat where there is no light. Jeff will talk through the process that we've gone through and where we've got to, but also in how we manage the research. What did you say to me before? The looking at when we look at light and this, when we've got significant areas, the best thing to do is not to have light. So we haven't got light, and we're not planning to have light in the red zone. We're taking them out. But we need light on our roads for road safety reasons. The next factor we can do is to reduce the amount of light, the light levels, reduce it down as much as we can. Hence, we've installed controllers and made sure that we change the light levels when they don't need to be as high for usage. The third thing is colour, which is about your Kelvin, 3,000 versus 4,000 versus others. Okay, so it's very complex. I've learned a lot about light over the last couple of years that I didn't know I needed to know. And we'll move on with that. But so as far as the research goes, firstly, I just want to highlight, please remember we signed off the business case in 2017 to accelerate the delivery of this, and it was a real step change that staff and our contractors stepped up to leverage the big subsidy that we could get from NZTA. At the time, we made the best decisions that we could at the time, and we've maintained consistency with that. I understand the concerns raised, and Jeff will talk to that. So that business case has been signed off. We have worked with NIWA, and we are working with them. My understanding is they've finished their research, but they are still finalising their report, and we don't have it at the moment. When we do have it, we will review it in the Christchurch context, and we will provide you some advice and the report when we have a chance to do that.
Just before you, can we just get clarity too around what approach we're taking around urban waterways as well in terms of installation of the LEDs, in terms of the colour? Thanks.
All the roads that have been lit to date have 4,000 Kelvin lights in them. The NIWA project is funded by MB and is a 3-year project, so that's due to terminate shortly, which is the reason why they're pulling the information together. I have had some discussions with the researcher, and I was pretty keen early on to make sure that we weren't doing any damage or likely issues, and I haven't seen the latest data, and I don't want to jump ahead, but the indications are that there's the 4,000 Kelvin LED is no worse than the HPS that was there before, and they will go through that. But the with the high pressure sodium, it used to scatter light far and wide. The LEDs are much more concise, and for a residential street, we used to use about 6,500 lumen lamp to light a street, and to light it to the same level with LED, we use 2,200 lumens. So it's almost a third difference. We can light with less light with a white light source. And that's been pretty fundamental in the business case. And the business case when we did it was pretty tight on getting it over the line. And at that stage, 3,000K was less efficient. It's still less efficient when we last looked at it, and we've looked at it at each time we've gone through that. So that's sort of where the focus is. We've tried to deliver the energy savings. We're saving $1.5 million a year. Had we delayed those savings, those OPEX savings would be delayed for the number of years we delay, and it's NZTA have said the higher level of funding is not available after the 30th of June that's just passed. So even with a global pandemic that held up supply of product, they would not allow any carryover of that, so that it's being funded at the lower rate. So that would have put, the higher level of, NZTA have contributed about 21 million to this project, and about 8.5 million of that is at that higher funding level. So that would have been lost had we not proceeded. So I think in areas where there's a potential issue or concern, if there was a particular species we're trying to protect, and that's the big issue, is we have to hone in on what the species is, because not all the insects are attracted to the same colour temperature of light. That varies. So we need to understand what we're protecting, and then we can look at the light levels. But as Lynette said, we've tried to contain the light within the road environment, and we have had some feedback that people, when they look out their windows, it looks dark because the house on the other side of the road is no longer lit up, and things like that. So we're confining it to the space we need. There's less light spilling into the rivers that are adjacent to the waterways, and we're also dimming in the early hours of the morning to try and reduce the amount of light in the environment when there's low use in the road space.
So all of our road upgrades have been upgraded in line with the business case that was agreed. And I do point to the pictures in the report, which show sort of a before and after. So with the city at night with high pressure sodium is the 2019 photo, and the city at night with much more of it is LED. It looks quite different.
And
So
a lot of that light is coming from buildings other than street lights. You know, I don't think any of those are street lights, because as soon as you're up above them, all the light's going down, you see no light.
So there's been it's been a mixed process of trying to put the light where we need it and not anywhere else. And the light colour is only one factor of it.
With the controller, because I understand we have a controller where we can dim them.
Yes.
We can change the level, but not the colour.
The colour is
set.
The colour's set.
In the future, they may do colour. You know, for buildings, they're looking at what they call tunable white, so you can have different coloured whites, and they're doing that particularly around circadian rhythms and things like that. Now, in a building, there's way more light. You know, we're talking about a residential street. We've got an average of less than 1.3 with a minimum of less than 0.5 lux. So it's very low level light, and that's where the eye is more sensitive to a white light source than a yellow light source.
So just so I'm clear, so we get the research. If it shows that there's an impact along our urban waterways, the ability for us to go back and retrofit and change the the colour.
The light, yeah.
Is we have that ability and we have funding to do that, or you know, are there areas that we are currently got scheduled for conversion that we could delay along our waterways, urban waterways in particular, until that research is complete?
I think I think it's a matter of waiting until the research comes out. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Initially they started testing in the red zone and they had to move away because they couldn't get any. They weren't trapping any insects of the types that they were looking for. So it's the urban waterways also have the houses on the other side with lights and things like that. So, and there are various current colours. So it's their latest research has been in Kaituna Valley area, which is really dark environment, to try and do the trapping. So I think that when we get a list back and they've made their conclusions and their recommendations, we can go. If there was a particular area where there was a vulnerable species, it would be a matter of going back and changing the lights. Those lights could be reused somewhere else, but there would be a cost, and that's not something we budgeted for. But if there's a big enough issue, then we could try and accommodate that. But as far as, you know, the red zone is an area, I think, well, I'm a transport person, I shouldn't be talking on behalf of parks, but I think it's an area that should be kept dark, and similar to Bottle Lake is used at night by mountain bikers, and they take their own lights. We don't light it for them. So, you know, if there's an opportunity to keep it dark as a dark sky environment, then an area people can go and observe the night sky, it's a good option.
I would like to take a quick opportunity to point out to the committee that Jeff and the team that have worked on this are very concerned about ensuring that our environmental impact is minimised, and they have taken this into account. We are currently still in conversations with the community at Birdlings Flat as to what the right thing to do is out there and what they as a community want. So we haven't just blindly bowled into this. There's been a lot of work done to ensure we do the right thing.
And one of the options out there is to remove the lights.
Yeah.
I mean, just a final bit of feedback is obviously there'll be a lot of interest in the study when it's released. Maybe we could think about just having a public presentation and having it presented back to us as soon as we can.
We can do that as soon as we can.
Thank you, Yanni. I've got a mover from Phil and Tim seconded it. Is there any more questions
on the report?
Yes, Jimmy.
One question regarding to the 170 project. Those one, how many project is in relation to the cycling, the safety and access? Also, because the community concern, at the moment, particular in the community board meeting, they concern we have a kind of a traffic improvement regarding to the Wigwam and also Hayton, the street intersection. However, the short of access for the cyclist from Wigwam to the Napuna Way, this section. So they would like to know whether have any to have at least a cycling the connection between this section.
between Wigram Road and Punawai.
Yes.
I can't answer that here, so I'll have to take that one offline. Sorry.
Yeah, it's possible. Also, Community Board, make recommendations whether it's possible for the high priority. Otherwise, these facility they cannot access. Actually, just a particular concept.
So if it's a community board priority, it should have come through the annual plan process.
No, they put into the as the one paragraph.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Pauline?
If I may, just on the 15-minute.
Are you giving me an option to say yes or no?
You're safe there.
Is it? We're discussing the report. Yeah.
You asked if you could.
It's a dead job.
Sorry.
Is it?
Yeah, you missed it. It just went over you.
Just ask.
No, I'm just being clear. I thought we might have switched back to the other report.
Well, then that's what their job says.
I just asked Jake if he could write it down for me. Just wondering why it's on page 60, defining access is the possibility of reaching 5 specified basic services. So you've got employment, food, shopping, education, medical needs, open spaces. What about recreation facilities? Would we expect to see them in there? Not major metro ones, but perhaps smaller ones like local gyms and.
So basically, when we defined the number of services, the basic services for the 15-minute city, one of the services was open spaces that could include those sort of facilities as well. The thing is, we can have as many as services as we want, but we need to be sort of more concise on what we actually want to tackle and what's actually covering or catering, accommodating the most number of trips that we, like a usual, like an average Christchurch residence makes on a certain day. So yeah, I appreciate a lot of those trips are not really, these are the broad brushes, so like broad brush categories of services that are different trips that we make on a daily basis. There are so many different trip purposes that we can identify, but they don't stack up in terms of numbers compared to these ones that we've selected. And these are all informed by the household travel surveys, which was lastly done in 2000, I think, somewhere around 6 or 7.
Right. But just because it's not listed here, if there was a local recreation facility like a small local gym, that would be encouraged to fit in with the policy of 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, I'll open it up for debates. Okay, it's been moved. Okay, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll go back to item 11. I've been informed that the amendment is out of order, and although I don't think Councillor McDonald agrees with it, he accepts it. So we'll just move forward and continue the debate. Pauline.
Thank you. I've pretty much forgotten what I was going to say now, but oh no, hang on, I wrote it down. No, look, I get a bit upset about the negative comments about buses that we hear, particularly from one councillor, and I can appreciate where you're coming from, but if we really want to move into a future city for the future, it is a growing city. Look at the building that's going on. We need to provide transport options for our people. And if you think it's not working well enough now, and I've seen improvements, as Councillor Turner has alluded to, and I've seen full express buses on my side of town, on the north side as well, then if you think they need improvement, this is improving it. And this is our part of the bargain with Environment Canterbury, the regional council that runs the buses. We provide the infrastructure. This is us walking the talk and supporting the group that we just supported with joining the MOU previously for supporting free buses to encourage more patronage. I mean, I was at the intersection of Colombo and Beeley Ave at evening traffic time the other night on my bike, and I counted 34 cars that went past with no one in them. Oh, there was a driver. Much the same as you might see a bus with no one in it. Oh, but there's a driver. So 34 cars with no one in it, and there were 2 with 2 people in it. So out of 36 cars, 34 had no one in them. So we really got to keep moving forward, and I really support this accelerated project. And I really think that if we can, there's no point in being negative about public transport. We're one of the only cities in New Zealand that are really not performing. Let's perform. Let's make the buses more frequent, more reliable, faster, more comfortable. We know we're getting more electric buses than ever, and more coverage is the next option. So let's work on that rather than being negative about our buses.
Does anyone want to speak out that hasn't already spoken before Sarah closes the debate? Excellent. Thank you, Sarah.
Kia ora. There are no silver bullets for climate change, and within that, there are no magic wands to wave and get transport mode shift to reduce emissions. While this is not everything from PT Futures that people might like to have done now, it is a start. And voting against this won't bring other projects forward, it'll just stop this work from happening. Those who continually gaslight on climate change, just asking questions on public transport or cycling, continue to spread misinformation saying that they've had no evidence, or asserting a fact that they increase congestion and emissions while providing no evidence of their own. Gaslighting is a well-used tool by those who simply don't believe, and it's a shame that at a time when the science has never been so clear that they continue this line. I support Andrew's comments about the specific Christchurch context and the lack of action on public transport that has got us to this state. There has been some tweaking, but not the step change in provision of service that's been done in other centres to actually lift patronage. Auckland, not a high-density overseas city, have invested significantly in public transport since 2000 and have seen a huge increase in passenger trips. And while there have been COVID blips, they continue to invest, and they're not high density. They are sprawled and know that more investment is needed. The Northern Busway has been such a success that more people now cross the Harbour Bridge during rush hour by bus than in cars. Councillor McDonald's amendment, while out of order, makes it very clear that he's happy for the government to fight climate change, but that he believes council has no role to play, and that's disappointing.
You do realise the same people pay.
We've heard from submitters today how important public transport is for so many of our residents to get around our city. We continually ask ECAN to do more routes or to lower fares, but we also need to play our part and to do the infrastructure changes that are needed.
Kia ora. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Who opposed it? We'll record that. Sam. Sorry. Yeah, Jamie. Aaron, so did you oppose it?
And these 2.
Yep. And Catherine.
James.
Yeah. So, okay. Excellent. Thank you. Carried. We'll now close the meeting with karakia from Councillor Templeton.
Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui o te tānei. Kia wātea, kia mama, te nako, te tinana, te wairua i te awa takata. Koe o rā o rongo. And a bit that I've forgotten. I didn't have it in front of me. Homie, huie, taikie. Wasn't ready for it. I didn't have it open.
You shouldn't have said it. You should have just went straight to the
I've been so... I had been... You would have known. I've been
Nobody
practicing that first one so hard because it's a brand new one to open today. And I've been... Yeah.